I'm going to give, I think they call it a trigger warning. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a trigger warning this morning, all right? So I may step on your toes this morning. It's out of love. And the reason that I know I may step on your toes is that as I was studying and God was showing things to me, it stepped on my toes. So I'll give you that trigger warning there, but know that it's from a place of love, and know that I'm right there with you, that I'm not perfect and I'm still growing in the Lord. So the title of my message is How Should a Christian Act? And Romans 12 is a great example, the whole chapter is a great example of what we should be looking for in our Christian life. And it's important for us to understand what Christ's expectations are of us. Because if you don't know the expectations, if you don't know how you're supposed to live and act, one, we're not in the will of God, but two, you'll miss out on some blessings and some joy and peace that can be in your life. So we'll start in Romans 12 and verse 1. It says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. So Paul starts off with this word beseech. And beseech basically means I beg you. And when we understand that in the new covenant, we have a will. You know, in the old covenant, under the law, it was a demand. There were things that were demanded of us. Paul here is begging of us to yield our bodies a living sacrifice. So when he says that we must submit ourselves, we have to submit to God's will. We have to submit to what God has asked us to do. And often it's against the flesh. Often it's against what the world says that that's how we should act. So he's saying that a holy and acceptable, which is your reasonable service. And when we talk about reasonable service, God is not an unreasonable God. However, in the world, they view some of the things that God asks of us to be unreasonable. But when you yield to His will and you follow His will for your life, you will find that you are in the reasonable service of God. Philippians 2 and 13, it says, For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasures. And there's a blessing in pressing into God. There's a blessing in yielding what you want to do to what God's will is. And that's easier said than done, because there's things that we want to do, there's ambitions that we have in life, but before any big step, before any major step in your life, you need to get on your knees and you need to pray and spend time with God and say, God, what is your perfect will? Because there may be 7 doors open in front of you, but only one of those may be what God has willed for you. And when you follow God's will, there's a blessing behind it. In verse 2 of Romans 12, Paul says, And be not conformed to this world, but be you transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So to be not conformed, we're not to be of the world. And too many American churches today have gotten as close to the world as they can and mimicked the world to try to bring people into Christ. The problem with that is when you bring yourself into the world or get close to the world, you're not going to see any changes with the people in the congregation. You should see, if you're in a true Spirit-filled church, you should see the congregation. There should be changes. There should be blessings. There should be strengthening of that Christian walk. And so he says, be not conformed. And we had an old church mother in my home church that I grew up in, and she used to always talk about being in the world. You know, we can't completely isolate and separate ourselves from the world. We have to be in the world and not of the world, if that makes sense. And one of the things that she would always use as an illustration, she said that it's kind of like putting a cloak or a jacket on. Just let the world touch you where it has to. Because we do have to interact in this world, and that's one of our calls from God, is to be a witness. So we have to go to work, we have to interact with people, we have to go to the grocery store, we have to go all these places, but that doesn't mean that we are of the world. So Paul is telling us here that we have to transform ourselves. And when he says that transformed, he's changed from a sinner to a saint, and there should be evidence of that. And that's what he begins to get into in this chapter, is there should be evidence that you are changed. There should be evidence that you are no longer the sinner that you once were. And we're all at different points in our life and in our walk with that. We're in all different areas of that. And there's things that we do really good on. You know, there's some of these things, as I read through this chapter, I was like, oh, I'm doing pretty good in that. And then there's some other areas I got to and said, oh, I'm not doing as good as that. So we have to know where we're at, and then we have to continue to grow in God's grace and love. So how do we be transformed? Again, we must have a willing heart, and we must yield to God. And sometimes that's a difficult concept to understand. Well, how do I yield? Is it a physical yield? Is it a mental yield? Well, yes. It is us saying, God, I truly want your will in my life. And it is putting on hold what you think is best and going to God and saying, God, open the doors that I should walk through. Close the doors that I don't need to walk through. God, I want what you want. If you've ever gotten mad at your job and you said, you know what, I'm quitting. I'm not going back to that job. Is that what God had for you, or is that what you have for you? And we have to make sure that as we walk in this life that we're in God's will. I've told the story before that I had made up in my mind when I got out of college. I was not going to go back to my hometown and be a teacher and a coach there. I wasn't going to do it. And I applied, probably 10, 15 jobs and didn't get a one. One job I walked in and the guy all but told me after the interview that you're it, you're who we're bringing in. And a guy walked in behind me and they hired him. And so God narrowed down my choices to my only choice was to go to that school. And so I'm thankful for that because I was blessed. I worked there for 9 years. It was a great place. I made a lot of friends and was able to impact a lot of lives. But we have to submit our will to God. And that's how we are transformed. And we have to understand God's will is perfect because he talks here about his good, acceptable, and perfect will. God's will is perfect. And sometimes his understanding and his thinking is well beyond anything that we have. Because sometimes we see something and we go, man, that's really good. I want that. And God has something 10 times better for you down the road. If we'll wait, if we'll be patient, and we'll wait on the Lord. And that's easier said than done because there's times where we want it quick. We want it now. We live in a world where we don't have to wait for things. We live in a world where you can pick up your phone and you can order something, and if you order it early enough in the day, it may be there by the time you get home from work. But we have to wait on his perfect will. Verse 3, it says, "For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God has dealt to every man the measure of faith." And that word soberly is right-minded and with self-control. We have to think, as a Christian, we have to be right-minded and we have to be sober, or we have to be self-control in our thinking. And Paul compares here, he compares being conceited to a form of insanity. And so we have to remember that whatever we have, whatever blessings we have, whatever that God has bestowed upon us, we have that by the grace of God. The things that we have and the things that we do well, we have to give honor for that to God and not look to ourselves because of that. Now, for time's sake, the 4th through the 8th verse, I'm just going to kind of summarize. He begins to talk about the body has many members, but all members don't have the same office. But he's talking about that every person in the church has a job and something that they are supposed to fulfill. He talks about some of it is exhorting, some of it's preaching, some of it's teaching. He talks about that some of it is giving. He uses the word ruling, but he's talking about serving as a position in the church, as maybe a deacon, something like that. And then he talks about showing mercy or cheerfulness, and it's a ministry to the sick. But God has called you for something. God has called you to be a part and a member of the church. You know, there's nothing on a healthy body. There's nothing on a healthy body that doesn't work. And I don't think it's a coincidence that God used the body of Christ, because we all have a function. We all have something that we are to do and that we are to be a part of in the church. And if you're not a part of something, I encourage you to look for something. I encourage you to look for that opportunity to serve, because it's a great blessing when you are working and putting your hands to things in the church. And if you're not for sure, pray. Talk to God. God, what do you need? What does this church need? What need can I fill for this church? And God will open the door. When I got here for, the first maybe 6 months, I just kind of came to church and we were just kind of filling things out and getting to know people. And we had moved from Oklahoma. And God laid on my heart to go ask about working a camera. They had mentioned it in one of the messages about that they needed workers in that. And I saw Sister Lincoln and Pastor Taylor were working cameras. And I thought, well, I probably could help out with that because they probably got other things they need to be doing in the ministry. Had no clue about working a camera or what all went on or any of those things. But I got trained up, I started working, and still working in that ministry. And it's a blessing to be a part of that ministry because you realize that what the operators, the video operators, the audio operators are helping to take this message of the gospel around the world. And they're a part of that. So looking for how we can serve. We'll skip down to the 9th verse. It says, let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. We have to love the things that are good and holy and righteous. We have to hate the things that are evil. And that's a strong word, hate. But we have to hate the things that are evil. Now, don't get that confused to say that we should hate a group of people or a type of person or anything like that. God is not saying that. But we have to hate the evil things in this world. In verse 10, it says, be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love, in honor, preferring one another. And that kindly affection is kin or love like a relative. We should have the love of God in our hearts. When people come into our congregation, when people visit our church, there should be a welcoming. There should be a love. There should be a family atmosphere when people come to church. You know, during COVID, we couldn't shake hands, we couldn't hug, we couldn't do all those things. And it was so refreshing when we got back to that because we need that connection. We need that love. And that's how a Christian should act. We should have love in our hearts towards others. I heard someone say it this way, you know, assuming positive. You know, when we meet someone, we should assume positive in their intentions until they show us otherwise. And that's something that's difficult for me. I tend to assume the worst and then let you show you the other. But that's not what God's word says. So I'm working on that one. That's one of those I'm not where I need to be on that. But to have that love of God, and you look at how Christ treated people. You know, in Rome, there were 3 different classes of citizens, and they didn't intermix. And yet Jesus intertwined and worked with every single class of person. He worked with every type of person, and he treated them all the same, from the high priest to the lowliest of low. And that's how we should be with our love. Verse 11, it says, not slothful in business, but fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. And whatever we do, it should be done with integrity. When you go to work on your job, you should have integrity in your job, and you should work hard. You should put in a good 8-hour day, 10-hour day, whatever it is. You should be a good worker because that's what God has commanded us to do. We shouldn't be that one that's in the break room complaining and griping and I don't know why they did this and I don't know why they did that. Every now and then you got to vent and get it out, but you can't live down there, right? You should be that ideal worker. You should be that worker that they look at and they say, man, if we had 100 of that person, we would be operating at a high level. That's where we should be because that's what God says we should be. In Philippians 2 and 14 and 15, it says, do all things without murmuring and disputing. That one kind of stepped on my toes a little bit because sometimes I complain when I have to do things. But that's what God says is we shouldn't be murmurers and complainers. We should be able to do things with joy and love in our heart. When we do stuff for others, it should be with a joy in our heart, not a complaining and a murmuring. He goes on to say, that you may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke in the midst of crooked and perverse nations, among whom you shine as lights in the world. In Colossians 3 and 23, it says, and whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. If you've ever had to begrudgingly do something and you walk over and you snatch it up and you do something for somebody and you go and you just grab it and walk. That's not in the love of God. We should be doing that not to that person, but we should be carrying out what God has asked us to carry out like we're carrying it out to Jesus. In the 12th verse, it says, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer. This is such a good verse. There's a lot to unpack. Rejoicing in hope. Believers should be filled with hope. I'm going to say that again. Believers should be filled with hope. And you got to check yourself on this one, because sometimes we find ourselves with the opposite of hope. Sometimes we find ourselves that we are looking at the worst and the negative in a situation. And then he says, not only should we be filled with hope, but we should be patient in tribulation. That's a tough one too. Because as a Christian, even when we're in the darkest hours and the toughest trials, we should have hope and we should have patience. And how do we get hope and patience? And he says it right here, continuing instant in prayer. And what that means when he's talking about instant, we should constantly be in prayer with God. That should be constantly on our lips. You know, sometimes you may have a decision or something you have to make, and you don't have time to stop and get in your prayer closet, but in your mind, you should be talking to God. God, help me make this decision. Lord, I thank you. Thank you for that. When you get a blessing at home or at work, Lord, I thank you for that. That should always be on our lips, instant in prayer. And how many times is that the last thing we go to? We talk to everybody else, and then we come back to God. That should be where we start. Lord, I'm not sure what to do with this. Help me. Help me know what to do. Show me where I need to be. He says in the 13th verse, distributing to the necessity of saints given to hospitality. That's helping those in need. That's looking for opportunities to bless those in need. And that doesn't mean, if someone's not doing what they're supposed to do, but there needs to be those opportunities to bless. And God may put something in your soul to give something, to give an offering, to give to someone, to help out. And when you have that, you should reach out and give it, because one, it's the will of God. And we said we have to yield our will to God. But then secondly, there's a blessing when you give. There's a blessing when you reach out and you're a blessing to someone else. There's a blessing on the other end of that. So it's important that we look to be hospitable, that we look to be helpful, especially when God gives us that in our hearts. The 14th verse, bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Can you pray for those who despise you? I ain't looking at anybody. You don't have to raise your hand. And I'm even going to go a step further. Can you pray for those that you despise? That's a tough one. It's easy to pray for our family members. It's easy to pray for those that we love, for the saints. But what about those that despise you? Can you lift them up in prayer? Can you say, God, help them? Can you pray for those that you despise, those that have done you wrong? I'm going to take it up another notch. Can you pray for the president? Ooh. Ooh. I ain't looking at anybody. Can you pray for our current president? Could you pray for our former president? Love or hate or nothing else, God uses men in powerful positions. Whether they're holy or unholy, you can see throughout the Bible powerful kings that God took and touched and was able to move and have things happen. We should be in prayer for our elected officials. I'm going to say it again. We should be in prayer for our elected officials. But you got to have your heart right to do that. And if you're not there yet, I'm not beating you up, but that's something we've got to work towards. Pray for those that despise you and pray for those that you despise. It says to bless them, not to persecute them. You know, it's when you are in a position that someone that has done you wrong and you can get them back and you got a chance to take a dig at them, what the Bible says is you shouldn't do that. That's a great time to witness. You know, sometimes we think of witnessing as telling people about Jesus, and that's definitely it. But another time to witness that you don't have to say a word about Jesus is when someone knows that oh man, and I used to say it like this, you about to get got. You know, you cross me, you about to get got. But when you're in that situation and someone knows that they've done you wrong and you turn the other cheek and you bless them, that's a strong witness. That's a strong witness because the only way that you can do that is through the grace of God. We don't have that capacity in ourselves as human beings because we're vengeful. But yet, what does the word say? Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. God will sort that out. I'm going to live my life the way that I'm supposed to live my life. I'm going to yield to God's good will, and the Lord will separate the rest of that out. Amen? Amen. Amen. 15th verse says, rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. We should be happy for those that are happy. When someone's got a good blessing and they come in and they're happy about something, we shouldn't be jealous of that. We should praise God with them. Praise God, you got a raise. Praise God, you got a promotion. Man, you were able to buy a new house. That is awesome. Praise God. And we have to have empathy for those that are sad. You know, sometimes someone may be going through something, and that's not a tough trial for you. Someone may be dealing with something, and you don't really understand why they're dealing with it and why that's hard for them. Why do you keep struggling with that? That's so easy. That's not our mindset that we should have. We should be empathetic towards our brothers and sisters. And if they have something we're struggling with, we should pray with them, and we should love on them and support them. And again, it's easier said than done, but so many times when we see someone else struggling with something, and it's easy for us, we automatically judge. Well, why can't they just do this? Well, on that thing you're struggling with, why can't you just do that? Sometimes it's that way, and we have to remind ourselves of that, and we have to remind ourselves of how long-suffering God is with us, because we all got that thing. We all got that thing that we struggle with. And it's as bad as you want to overcome it and as bad as you want to walk away from it, when it gets a hold of you, it's tough. Yet, when we fall short, God's right there to pick us up again because he knows our hearts. And we have to be that same way with others. We don't know their hearts. When they're struggling, when they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, we still have to show the love of God, and we have to lift them up to Christ. And rather than run and go gossip to someone, did you see what Sister So-and-so posted? Ooh, I don't know why she posted that. It should be, Lord, I pray for her. I don't know what's going on, but I pray for her, and Lord, help her. Amen. It says in the 16th verse, be of the same mind one to another, mind not high things, but consent to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Be of the same mind. We should be of the same mind as Christ. And if you've never really dug into the scriptures where it talks about Christ's life, there's so many lessons that he teaches in how he deals with people, how he deals with the sinners, how he deals with the church members, how he deals with his disciples. And there's great lessons in that, and you could do a year's worth of Bible studies over how God treats people, over how Christ treats people. It says, mind not the high things. It says, but condescend. And our condescend is different than what it means here, but it means to be friendly with the people of no status. How you treat the lowliest people in society is who you truly are. How you treat people that can't help you, people that can't help you get a leg up or get a rung up, that's who you truly are. You know, as Christians, sometimes we tend to, we forget that we're supposed to always be a Christian. Not just when we're at church and not just when we're feeling good. We have to be that Christian at all times. That love has to be in our heart at all times. 17th verse, it says, recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. You know, the Old Testament was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And if you read the Levitical law there, man, it was you did this, you died. There was nothing about it. This happened, this happened. It's very black and white. But in the new covenant, it's grace. And we forget sometimes how much grace has been afforded to us. But sometimes we forget to pass that on. You know, you hear the term pay it forward. We should pay that grace forward. Again, that doesn't mean that we should let people mistreat us or that we should just be a doormat to let people walk on, but there has to be grace. There has to be humility because we have to remember back to how God has loved us and God has given us grace when we didn't deserve it. Sometimes you hear that, well, they don't deserve another chance. You didn't either. I'm just being honest this morning. Again, that steps on my toes too, but that's the thing is, we didn't deserve another chance. We didn't deserve it. When you fall, when you stumble, when you act ugly, God picks you right back up and gets you right back in line. But how many times when our brothers and our sisters act that way, we're quick to cut them off. We have to remember that we must provide honest things in the sight of all men. Talks about in the 18th verse, if be possible, as much lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. We should live peacefully as much as we can. Sometimes we go around and, man, we come and we are looking for a fight. I'm just looking for somebody, just look at me wrong, and I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to tear you up. I've had to go back and apologize to my kids sometimes because I come home and it's been a rough day, and I've been dealing with children all day. And I can't smack them children at the school, but I can smack my own kids. And I come home and they say something wrong to me or look funny at me, and boy, I tear them up. But I have to come back and say, I'm sorry, forgive me. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I'm sure y'all don't ever do that. That's probably just me. But we shouldn't go around looking for conflict. We shouldn't go around looking for a fight. Yet, sometimes we do. So if that's something you struggle with, if that's something that's not where you are, work on that and take that to God. And that's the great thing. None of this we have to get there on our own. You know, I talk a lot about sometimes self-help books. And there's nothing wrong with looking to improve yourself or looking to be better. But so many times we try to fix it ourselves and we only make it worse. But when you take it to God, when you lay it at the feet of Jesus and say, God, I don't want to fight with people all the time. I don't want to be combative and angry. That's tiresome, to be angry all the time, be upset all the time. Man, you're just wore out by the end of the day. But if you have that hope and that joy and that love, man, the day goes so much better when you're not looking for a fight. Now, again, it says to live peaceably as much as you can. There's times that there's conflict. There's times that we have to sit down and we have to talk things out. But even as we're talking things out, even as we're working through things, we still can do that as a Christian, and we can still do that with the love of Christ in us. He goes on to say in the 19th verse, Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but gather and give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. And he's talking about here in Deuteronomy 32 and 35, where he says, vengeance is mine. And God will fight our battles. God will take what has happened and he will take care of it because his justice is perfect and good. And so then he goes on to, he doubles down after that. He says, therefore, if your enemy's hungry, feed him. If he thirsts, give him a drink. For in doing so, you heap coals of fire on his head. So if your enemy needs something, help them out. Give them something. But the second part of this verse he talks about here, heaping coals of fire on his head, it's talking about, it's not vengeance. A lot of times people read that and they think that, oh man, I'm gonna put coals of fire on their head. But that's not what that's talking about. What it's talking about, there's a couple of different interpretations, but with the brazen altar, they would put coals of fire on there, and that represented judgment. And they would be taken off of that to the altar of incense, and it was a sweet savor to God. And so what he's talking about here is when you return good for evil, you are sending a sweet incense up, and you are allowing someone the opportunity for them to get right. And that's truly a strong witness. When someone has done you wrong, and whether they say it or not, they know they've done you wrong, but when you return good for evil, that's not normal. That's not of the world. And that's the greatest witness that you can have. When you can return good for evil, when someone is harmful to you, when someone is hateful to you, and you can turn and return and you don't retaliate, that's strong, that's powerful. That's why a lot of times we get called hypocrites in the church, because we act like the world. We respond like the world does. But when you have something different in you, when you have the Holy Spirit in you, you will respond differently than the world. And that's what he's talking about here. my first year of marriage, I've been married 19 and a half years. This year will be 20 years. So I know a little bit about it. By my first year of marriage, actually this year, I will have been married longer than I've been alive. So I got married at 19 years old. I don't recommend that. My wife and I, we were children, and we fought like children the first year of our marriage. It was terrible. We both thought we had made a mistake. Now, 19 years later, we're doing good. We're doing well. But we fought. And in my mind, don't hold this against me, in my mind, I'm the head of the household. What I say goes. When I say jump, you just say jump how high. All the married people are laughing in here. But that's how I thought it went. We didn't know how to have an argument, and that sounds silly to say, what do you mean you don't know how to have an argument? The purpose of an argument is to correct the behavior and come to an understanding. We were just fighting to win the argument. I'm going to say what I need to say to win this argument, and that was the goal. And so for a year, we went through that. And I took it to God, and in my mind, I'm like, yeah, God's going to get her right. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to talk to God, and God's going to get her right and let her know. And so I start praying, and I'm like, God, did I make a mistake? You know, I love her, but man, it's getting on my nerves. And God started dealing with me, and God told me, close your mouth. I didn't like that. I said, but I'm the man. She's supposed to submit to me. And then God hit me right between the eyes with it. He said, you have to submit to me. Ooh, that one hurt. So I took a deep breath, and so we would get into it, and she would start talking, and I'd just shut my mouth. I'd walk out of the room. I didn't say anything. I did that for about a month. That is one of the hardest things I've ever have to do, to just close my mouth and not jab right back. You say this to me, well, I'm going to say this to you. I did that for about a month. And what I found is when I got myself right, then God could deal and work with her, and she got herself right. So many times we pray and we go, get them, God, sick them, go get them. And that's not what God has called us to do. Take care of yourself. When you get yourself right and you start once I started treating her with the respect that she deserved and that she needed, God took care of everything else. I didn't have to say anything. And she told me, you know, we talked about that, and she said, yeah. She said, I noticed you just got real quiet when we would argue. I noticed you just got real quiet and you didn't say anything. And she said, I could see that I was hurting you. But you can't see that until you're quiet, until you stop fussing and fighting and doing all that. And you realize, okay, what's the goal of this? The goal is for us to come together and figure this out. We have a problem. We have to work through it. And you can get angry. I still get mad at her. She still gets mad at me. I still get on her nerves. But we know we love each other, and we come together and we talk about it. And we go, okay, I'm feeling like this. Okay, well, I'm feeling like this. And you have to work through it. And marriage is tough. Marriage is hard. It's regardless of what people say, that's why half the people in the country are divorced. That's why half the people in the world don't stick together, because it's tough. And if you don't have God in the center of it, it's double tough. But again, we're not supposed to be of the world. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. And so how we act and how we treat not only our spouses, but anyone, that's what people should see. In the 21st verse, it says, be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. I'm going to ask the musicians to come as we're wrapping up here. You know, I love, my family laughs at me because I don't like sad movies at all. I have a list of movies that I'll never watch again. Old Yeller, Where the Red Fern Grows. I ain't watching any of those. I don't like to be sad. I don't like to cry, and I'm a big baby. When I watch movies and it's a sad movie, I feel terrible. I hate it. But I love the movies. I love the superhero movies. I love the action movies, you know, where the hero comes in and saves everybody and nobody dies, and, you know, everything just works out. Those are the kind of movies that I like. And I thought about that when I read this scripture. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Too many times we're trying to fight a battle that's in the spiritual realm, and we're trying to fight it physically. But when we understand that all I have to do is get on my knees and pray to my Heavenly Father, and He hears me, and he answers my prayers. And it's not automatic. Sometimes you got to keep going back, and you got to keep praying, and you got to keep seeking. But his arm is not short. He has a blessing for you. And when we're going through troubles and we're going through trials and we're struggling in those areas, that's when God will strengthen us. That's when God will pick us up out of the miry clay and dust us off and help us to get over. We have to remember that. Overcome evil with good. The question comes up, well, Chuck, how far should we go with this? Because people will take advantage of you. People will use you. People will abuse you. So how far do I go with that? Well, one, you got to listen to God. God will let you know. But we have examples. I think of Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery, was to be a slave. He was left for dead in a jail. And he rises to power. Joseph is considered a type of Christ because it never talks about, now he definitely sinned and probably came short, but you can see through his life how he responded. His responses were always Christ-like. So he rises to the second most powerful person in Egypt. The only person that has more authority and power than him is the Pharaoh. And his brothers come into the city and they don't recognize him. These brothers that thought to kill him, that thought to leave him in a pit, that traded him into slavery. And how does he respond? He pulls them in and he shows them the love of God. He could have snapped his fingers and destroyed all of them, and then went back and got his father and his younger brother who he loved and brought them and made up whatever kind of story that he wanted to make up. But yet what did he do? He brought them in, gave them positions, gave them power, and he was able to take care of his family. How did he attack evil? He overcame it with good. And that's what we have to remember. When people are ugly, when people are mean, when people mistreat us, when people do us wrong, the world responds with that with anger. But God says to respond to that with love. The last verse, we'll finish up in Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. As we therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially those who are of the household of faith. Saints, don't get weary today. Don't get weary in doing good and doing the work of the Lord. Don't get weary when you are good to people and you give them of yourselves and they return it with evil. Continue to be that good and faithful servant. Continue to be that person that walks with God and that shows that Christian love, that shows that witness of this is how a Christian should act. There's plenty of examples of Christians acting like we shouldn't act. Be that example at your job. Be that example in your family that shows that love and that grace. And it says, as we therefore have opportunity. And that's the thing. We can choose to look at troubles and trials and be downtrodden and sad, or we can look at it as an opportunity. This is an opportunity to not show what I can do, but to show what God can do through me. That when I walk through a fiery trial, when I walk through things that are hard, that I can still have joy and peace. That doesn't mean you don't suffer. That doesn't mean that things don't go wrong, but it means that we have a joy and a peace and a love that the world can't understand. Hallelujah. Let me pray with you as we dismiss. If you'll stand to your feet. Father, we thank you so much for your love and your grace, for your mercy and your long suffering. God, I pray that everyone in this room, that you would help us to take a step closer to you. Lord, as we read through Romans chapter 12, there's no doubt there's all of us that there's things that we struggle and we're not where we need to be. But we thank you for your love and your grace that allows us to grow. Lord, I pray that we would improve in those areas. I pray that you would help us to show our love, and that even though we're in the world, that we are not of the world. We thank you and we praise you. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for watching, and please subscribe. You can also find more of our videos in our archives at ChristUnveiled.org. We'll see you next time.